What's up, Shred Sexies? Welcome back. Death to the Fingers. We got an emergency broadcast. A brother in need. Essentially, they're like, please help me with this modal chord progression and modal sounds. How do I get the Phrygian sound? How do I get the Dorian sound? I've been tried a few techniques and no dice. So I'm going to go through the basic theory. I do some examples. Obviously, I use the Vinnie Moore method where there's just a single bass note. Now, this is the most effective for training your ear to actually recognize these different modes. So I'm just going to say that straight out. That's why I do it. Sometimes people get into vamps and stuff. There's harmony involved with that, so it skews your perspective. You need just a single note. So if you have a keyboard or you want to download like something even as basic as Audacity and get some free software to use essentially to produce some simple audio, you know, with just freeware, I would highly recommend it. And then you can actually have a practice tool there with a metronome, if you will, to effectively work through the idea of these modal sounds. So without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, let's go over the basic theory here. Essentially, check out this blank fretboard. I'm going to take this abstract knowledge from the diatonic scale theory. I'm going to apply it to the note G. Okay, so I'm getting the G major scale. That's the key I'm working in. If I wanted B major, I'd pick this entire system up. I'd move it to B. If I wanted F major, I'd move it down to F. If I wanted E major, I'd move it either to the open position or I'd move it to the 12th fret. Once I get that down, I can start filling in the blanks and understand that each one of these positions, the Ionian position, the Dorian position, the Phrygian position, they correspond with a whole bunch of information. Ionian has the Ionian pentatonic, or 3 notes per string, the major scale, or the major triad arpeggio, or the major 7, dominant 7 arpeggio. So now all of a sudden you have these systems overlapping. You have caged as an E-type chord there. You have, of course, the classical or 3 notes per string as a scale system. You have even more information. You can start to apply the harmonic minor or the melodic minor to that too and come up with new combinations, but that's another video. Now, imagine if you were taking that note B and started to move it through a major scale. Okay, where B is the 2nd degree. Well, that would make it A major. So imagine now you're going to play B as the lowest note and just keep this sort of tone happening consistently, but played all the notes of A major. So you start the 3 notes per string system from the 5th fret. Well, you'd be getting the Dorian flavor. If you did it from the 3rd fret, Phrygian, and you'll notice they're really, really dark and whatnot. But then you get into Lydian, you're like, okay, that sounds pretty badass. Then mix a Lydian, you'll be like, yeah, that sounds very nice. Aeolian, that's an obvious one. It's going to be the minor. Locrian, again, another really dark one. And those really heavy-duty ones, Dorian, Phrygian, and Locrian, those are where you start to substitute in the harmonic minor, the melodic minor, and sort of the more exotic scales, diminished and whatnot. So that's how that works. If you're like, the major modes are not cutting it, but when you're playing in Phrygian, all of a sudden you start playing strictly in the harmonic minor, you'd be like, whoo, that sounds way better. And same deal when you're doing the Dorian position instead of just doing straight up Dorian, which sounds pretty cool. But getting into the melodic minor there can be a godsend and a great way to utilize that scale. So I'm just giving you the heads up. So in the examples, you hear me go through major and minor, obviously, and then Lydian. And last but not least, of course, you can start to extend that idea where you now take the 4 and 5 chords from the position that you're working in. So if B is Phrygian, that's G major. G major's 4 and 5 is C and D. So you're going to play B with the C major triad in the bass, right? Or sorry, the B in the bass and then C major triad and then B in the bass and then D major as a triad, and that's going to give you your progression. Okay? A Phrygian progression, and that'll sound very strange, and you'll hear me do it again with Lydian because it sounds a little more cooler, and do this sort of like very sort of traditional 80s thing. So that should pretty much wrap it up. And then, of course, it's just up to you to practice. Now, listen, doing vamps on the internet and whatnot can be dangerous, so be careful, because some of those things come with harmonic components. They're playing more like a chord, just repeatedly over and over and over again, and that can mess with you. It needs to be a single note, so if you have to, do what you need to, but just get that. Also, a great way of doing it is using a looping pedal. Just one note, you know, with a simple rhythm pattern can be very, very, very useful. And then, of course, you can just start looping it and start doing all of this modal work, and you'll be thanking me in no time. So there it is. Hope this video helped. We'll see you guys in the next one.